Welcome everybody. I hope you can hear me. I'm discombobulated. Just a second. Okay. All right. So I know that Kouri Richins was in court, had a hearing, and because I've been working, I didn't see it. So that is what. Whoops. That's what I'm going to be doing right now. Is I'm going to be watching the hearing that was for Kouri Richins. Hey, Rochelle Black, how are you doing? I'm going to be watching the hearing for Kourtni Richins, and getting caught up on that. So, I have some days where I work like nothing but work. There's no time, to do any kind of YouTube or anything. And so I have other days where I have maybe an afternoon or a couple of hours here and there that I can do it. So I'm catching up on that. I don't know that there's been any kind of updates to the disappearance and murder of John Forsyth in Missouri or Arkansas. But that is the case that, I continue to be really, really interested in. It's got the whole cryptocurrency aspect to it. But I do think with the developments that happened last week, I do think we got a pretty good indication. The cops are really looking hard at Richard Forsyth. The police have gone very quiet, and that is something that, we kind of associate. They're getting ready to make their move, right? So I would. They may have an arrest, that'll be coming soon. So we have that. Hey, Tiffany Guzman, how are you doing? Hey, Diane, welcome. Fried flour. Okay. I don't know if there is. I don't know if there's like some big YouTubers live right now, or there's some trial or something that's going on. But like I said, I'm trying to catch up with the Kourtni Richins trial. And so, or not trial, but hearings at this point. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be watching. And if you want to watch with me, then that would make me happy. And, I'm not going to be talking a lot unless something really stands out. I will say this. Sorry. I will say this. I do think that I don't know why my graphic is not there. There it is. But when my camera's on, you can't see it. So I'm going with Psychopaths Are Us. Even in the case of Kourtni Richins, obviously I've not done any kind of evaluation of Mrs. Richins, but she does have some things that, little strange, possibly, or perhaps she's very shy, and so there are reasons that people can seem a bit detached. But I do think if what the accusations are, if it's true that she loaded her husband up with fentanyl and then refused to give him CPR and waited hours before she called the cops because he was in rigor mortis, then maybe if the shoe fits, right? So that is my Psychopaths Are Us graphic. And so from here on out, whenever we are addressing topics or issues related to psychopathy, that is what we will be looking at. So, all right, let me look at a couple of comments here. Day tripper, a one-way ticket. Yeah, I like the Beatles. Hey, Fancy Nancy. Hey, hybrid Pisces. Welcome. It's good to see you. All right. So have y'all seen this? If you put a 1 if you've already watched the hearing. I haven't seen it. And I think perhaps I think Plunder might have a maybe police body cam or a transcript of when the police were there. Maybe that's what it was a transcript. So we'll have to go over that as well. So hey, you are too mean. Hey, Daisy Sunshine. Zippity doo dah, zippity a. All right, haven't seen it. Okay, good. So some of you haven't seen it, some of you have. So that's what we're gonna do. All right. So I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna quit talking now, and we are gonna watch this. Yeah, that's better, isn't it? Okay. And I think I can actually make it a little bit bigger. Yeah. Make sure the sound's up. All right, here we go, peeps. Oh, wait a minute. I don't have any sound. Why don't I have sound?
And then ultimately unlocked at
this point. We weren't sure this was going to come.
On the evening of the death.
The sound.
Correct.
I was not aware of that.
The sound problem is the courtroom. All right, there's the beginning.
You came onto this case then, or when did you come onto this case?
In April of this year.
Okay. And you took over as lead detective?
Yes.
And you, at some point after that, went to Kouri's home, correct?
Correct.
And introduced yourself and asked her, do you remember me? You coached me.
I think so too, Tiffany.
And who was the other detective with you?
Sergeant Hoffmeyer.
Sergeant Hoffmeyer said, hey, and she coached my son, correct?
I believe so.
And presumably, because you are the lead detective, you knew she presented at that time, correct?
I was not aware of that.
Okay, so you had reviewed the entire. No, she.
What
I had
is
not
the
reviewed
sound?
the entire case file at the time that I approached Ms. Richins to introduce myself as the new detective so that she would know that what was going on with the case.
Do you have any conversations with the district attorney's office prior to you talking to her?
I do not.
Do you ever ask her if she'd like a lawyer present?
No.
Did he ever make mention of that?
A mug, some kind of container for.
What is the deal, Lucille?
Gaps in time frames and cell phones. Based on the carrier records, what have you been able to determine about gaps, particularly from early January until shortly after the defendant's death?
We were able to determine from looking at the phone that it appeared that data from several different apps on the phone was missing in that time frame between January and just shortly after Eric Richins' death.
Let me turn now back to CL. On the very first time you met with CL, you testified that you kind of laid out kind of the predicament she was in, facing serious charges, but having potentially valuable information regarding a very serious death investigation.
Day tripper, right?
That first meeting.
Nanu,
How long until you
nanu. Live long and prosper,
questioned
baby.
her about the drug purchases?
For 4 or 5 days.
So you laid everything out for her on the first meeting, and then gave her 4 or 5 days to consider whether she wanted to cooperate and then interviewed her substantively?
Correct.
Let me talk about that interview process. About how long after Eric Rich's death are you now interviewing?
Over a year.
Oh my
A
God.
year and a couple months.
In order to jog her memory, what, if anything, did you show her?
We showed her the contents of the phone that we seized. We showed her Google Maps, Google Earth. We showed her screenshots of.
That's not me, is it? I think this is
Witnesses'
the
phones or
recording.
screenshots of those phones. Showed screenshots of communications between her and that other witness. It asked that the court file it private at this point. We weren't sure this was going to come up today. We may need to redact some things from it.
Right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter before the court to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, subject to the pains and penalties of perjury?
Sorry about that. It looks like this is a bit better once you get further into the recording.
Sir, could you please tell us your name and spell your last name?
Sure, it's Chris Kourtni. Last name is Kourtnimus.
Thank you. Mr. Kourtni, how are you employed at this point in time?
I own a private investigation firm,
What's that called?
M20 Solutions,
How long have you been the owner of that firm?
about 7 months.
What did you do prior to owning that business?
I was a police officer for over 23 years.
And where did you work as a police officer?
I started my career in Raleigh, North Carolina. I moved to Utah and took a position with Salt Lake City Police Department, where I worked on the homicide unit there. In 2017, I took a position with the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office on the homicide team there, and until my retirement in December of 2022.
Do you have any specialized education, training, or experience with forensic digital evidence?
I do, yes.
Could you briefly explain what that is?
Sure. So I've attended several formal courses, one being a Cellbrite Certified Operator course, a Cellbrite Certified Physical Analyzer course. I've also attended a 40-hour cell phone analysis and mapping course through ZX. After using those skills for several years, I also attended a ZX 40-hour subject matter expert course on the same subject, cell phone, social media mapping, those types of things. My experience related to my testimony on those courses is I've worked either directly or indirectly on more than 200 homicides and major crimes. I've inspected and evaluated thousands of phone and social media records and phone downloads.
Thank you. What is your role in the case that brings you to court today?
I was retained by the Summit County Attorney's Office to evaluate digital evidence in this case.
And what evidence have you reviewed?
I reviewed several cell phone downloads or extractions. I've reviewed and analyzed call detail records and some social media records, things like that.
Can you tell us what the difference between carrier records and call data records are?
Yeah, so a call data record or a cell download is kind of what it's commonly called, is information that is extracted or downloaded from a phone onto some type of media, external drive, things like that. And it does so into a reader, which you're able to analyze the data that's contained within a device. That's a cell phone extraction or download. A carrier record or a call detail record is the regular record that you would have. It's the usage of the phone through your carrier. So it records the date and times of your calls, your texts, your data usage for a given period of time. And it can include location information, such as like tower data.
Can there be discrepancies between carrier records and the data that's extracted from a device?
Yes.
What would cause that?
Usually, sometimes it's because it just wasn't captured in the phone download due to a software limitation, but typically where we see it is through deletion of information on the device that does not match the carrier records that we received from the phone company.
Did you analyze forensic extractions of an iPhone belonging to the defendant that was seized April 13th of 2022?
I did.
Does it contain digital information pertaining to the night of March 3rd and into the morning of March 4th, 2022?
It does.
What does that phone show? Well, let me ask it this way. What is the last time that phone is used on March 3rd of 2022?
The last activity reported on the defendant's phone is an activity device movement at 22:33 hours or 10:33 p.m. on March 3rd.
When was the next time that phone was used?
The phone was inactive and then ultimately unlocked at 3:07 a.m. on March 4th, 2022.
Was there anything that happened between those two timeframes?
On that device?
On
No.
that device?
No.
Her goose
Does
is
the extraction of that phone indicate if it was moved in that time frame?
It does.
And how are you able to tell that?
Through the download, in this case we use Cellbrite for the download. In the download, it gives an activity, like a connected device activity movement. Usually that's an indicator of another connected device, such as a tablet or a smartwatch or something of that nature. Those two devices will communicate with each other and report potential movement of the phone through that application.
Was there anything significant that occurred at 3:22 hours on March 4th?
At 3:22, yes, a 911 call was made.
So between the time that the phone is used at 3:07 that morning and 3:22, is there any activity that could be seen from the download?
There is.
What is that?
At 3:07, the device is unlocked. At
I agree.
3:08 a.m.,
Hybrid Pisces.
the device
Done.
reports some type of movement. Either the device itself or a connected device is moving. At 3:12, the phone was unlocked. At 3:16, the phone was unlocked again. At 3:19, the phone was unlocked again, potentially twice. There was movement again at 3:21, and then at 3:22, the 911 call was made.
So roughly a time frame of 15 minutes between the first time that phone is used and the time that a 911 call is placed.
Correct.
Wow.
Now, the attached device that's recording movement, could that be an Apple Watch?
It could be.
Do you have any way of telling from the extraction you examined what that device was that was recording that movement?
So far in the extraction, I have not been able to. I may at some point, but at this point, no.
And as far as the movement, what kind of movement is this? Is it significant?
It is significant, I think, for occurring in a home.
And can you explain what that movement was?
Correct. So at 3:08, there's movement on the phone, or on a device is connected to that phone is moving, and it moves. I don't remember the exact amount of time, but I believe it's several feet. I do know that at some point there was two movements right before the 911 call, and they're both significant. One was about 240 feet, it's like 74 meters and change, and the other one was about 130 feet. This is right before the 911 call.
Okay, thank you.
That was serious movement. Wow.
As you were analyzing the forensic data from that extraction, were you able to observe any noticeable patterns of deletion from that phone?
It appears that there is some deletion in that device.
Okay, and can you describe what is being deleted in that phone?
It looks like there's gaps in things like web history, web searches, particularly the call log. When a person makes or receives a call or a text, those are recorded in the call log of the phone. And there are
It's official. Kourtni Richins.
there's messaging that is included in the carrier report, call detail record, that I would expect to see also logged within the device that are not in the device.
Okay, so you're seeing those in the carrier records, but not on the device themselves.
Correct. For instance, there's multiple calls and texts to an individual. I would expect to also see that retained in the call log of the device itself. And in a lot of instances, particularly in the weeks prior to the death, there's a lot of that is missing.
And from the carrier records, are you able to tell who those calls were going to?
Yes.
What is that?
There are several people. But as it relates to this case, one that stood out was a witness that has been mentioned as CL.
Oh, give up the name, man.
In those carrier records, were there logs of calls made to CL in January of 2022?
I don't recall January.
Did you analyze a forensic extraction of a second iPhone belonging to the defendant that was seized in May of 2023.
Yes.
When did activity begin on that phone?
The activity on that phone started shortly after her original phone was seized in April of 2022.
Were you able to observe internet searches on that phone?
Yes.
And did you create a PowerPoint of some of those searches?
I did.
And just for the court and counsel's reference, this is docket item 141. Were you able to tell when those searches were done?
Yes.
How did you do that?
There is a date and time stamp of the history, the web history. So for instance, if you visit a website and you click through it using your device, it will report what date and time that you did that connected to that website.
On April 18th of 2022, did the phone access an internet site of an article entitled "What Happens to Deleted Messages"?
Yes.
On May 10th of 2022, did that phone access a site for an article entitled "How Do Police and Forensic Analysts Recover Deleted Data from Phones"?
Yes.
She's not very smart, is she?
Did that phone was a query placed in that phone, quote, "Can cops, period, uncover deleted, period, messages, iPhone," close quote?
Yes.
Did that phone search, quote, "How to, period, permanently delete information from an iPhone remotely," close quote?
Yes.
Did that phone search, quote, "Luxury prisons for the rich in America"? Did that phone search, quote, "If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as," close quote?
Yes.
Were you able to tell when those things were searched?
The
Luxury
search
prisons
themselves,
for the
there
rich.
was no date and time reported for the individual search. However, I found corresponding websites to those searches that did have the dates and times in the web history.
And was there a certain time frame that these searches were made?
They were.
Can you describe what that was?
It's typically between, well, shortly after her original phone was seized. So from middle of April of 2022 through, memory serves me right, about August of 2022 off and on.
Thank you. Now you mentioned your training with cell phone mapping using cell tower data.
Yes.
Have you employed that in your review of the evidence in this case?
I have.
And specifically, can you explain just briefly how cell phone mapping is done using cell phone cell tower data?
Sure. Sorry, I looked that way. I'm used to talking to a jury. So cell mapping is accomplished by taking call detail records that contain tower location in them and putting them into a piece of software that will visually show you a location on a map of which tower that device was accessing when it made or received a call or a text. So it takes lines of data and creates the map out of it.
And is that plotted on like a program like Google Earth?
It is.
Okay. And are you able to tell any directionality from when a phone connects to a tower? Is there any directionality to that where you can tell approximately where that phone is transmitting from?
Yes. Yeah. So the cell phone, the companies report which tower the device is utilizing and which sector. There's an estimated range to that, which is a bit ambiguous on the range. However, it will tell us at least what side of the tower that the device was located when it made or received a call or text.
How many sectors are there on each cell tower?
Typically 3.
And so if a phone is connecting to a tower through a certain sector, can you tell that it's someplace where that sector is for lack of a better word, broadcasting or collecting signals?
Yeah. So we can determine the orientation of the device to certain locations.
Did you map data from CL's phone extraction?
I did.
Were you able to track that phone's movements on February 11th of 2022?
Yes,
At any time, was it at or near a Maverick gas station in Draper, Utah?
it is.
And are you aware of the significance of that location in this investigation?
I am.
And what is that?
This is the location that CL had indicated to detectives that she bought drugs on behalf of the defendant.
Do you recall approximately what time of day that was? It was there?
She shows up on that tower near that Maverick at about 6:49 p.m. and remains there until about 8 p.m. on February 11th, 2022.
Does that phone make any calls or send any texts while at that location?
It did.
And to anyone notable to this investigation?
Yes, 2 people.
Who was that?
One would be to another acquaintance in which CL indicated she had purchased the drugs from, and CL was also texting with the defendant.
Well, she was at a gas station in Draper purchasing narcotics.
Correct.
On that day, did the phone go to a did the phone go to a location in Heber City?
It did.
Was the mapping that you did of CL's phone consistent with the account that CL gave to law enforcement regarding that first drug purchase?
Yes.
Were you able to track CL's phone movements on March 9th of 2022?
Yes,
Was the phone ever in Francis, Utah on that day?
it was.
Was it ever at or near the same Maverick?
Is it just me, or does this guy seem like really nervous? I get the feeling that he's super nervous. What do y'all think? If you think that he does seem to be overly nervous, put a 1.
In Draper, Utah.
It was.
Were there any communications from the phone at that time while it was at the Maverick?
Yes, at the Maverick, yes.
Did it communicate with any phone belonging to a person relevant to this investigation?
It did.
Who was that?
At the Maverick, it communicated with, I guess, corroborating witnesses to the drug purchase on the 9th. When the device was utilizing a tower in Francis, it was about midday on March 9th, and CL's phone was in communication with the defendant's phone.
While she was in Francis, Utah.
Correct.
Did the phone go to a location in Midway, Utah on or about that day?
Yes.
Are the movements that you tracked for CL's cell phone on March 9th of 2022 consistent with the information she gave to law enforcement in this investigation?
Yes.
Finally, I want to speak with you briefly about Mr. Eric Richins' phone. Did you analyze a forensic extraction of his phone?
I did.
When was the last use recorded from Eric's phone?
From memory, I believe it was about 9:58 p.m. on March 3rd, 2022.
And are the times that are on the extraction from that are populated in the Celebrate download, are those, what time zone are those given in?
Typically, the extraction is provided in UTC 0. Yes.
And so do you have to, so can you just briefly explain what UTC 0 is?
Right. So UTC 0 is Greenwich Mean Time. It's an effort by people that utilize data and do data investigations to try and keep everybody on the same time zone. Utah is in UTC -7 during standard daylight time, and we are in -6 in daylight savings time. So from November, in this case, from November of 2022 to about March 13th. I'm sorry, November of 2021.
Yes, Elizabeth.
To
That's
March, I
funny.
believe it was March 13th, 2022. Local time in Utah was UTC -7.
Okay. So if those times are given on that download as UTC
Oh,
-5,
the tangled
that
web,
would be,
Willie.
Eastern Standard Time.
Correct. It would be 2 hours ahead of local Utah time.
So to adjust for Mountain Standard Time, you would have to,
He's so
Go back to
nervous.
You'd have to subtract 2 hours. Okay.
and that's what gave you, can you repeat that the last time that Eric's phone was used on March 3rd?
I believe it was 9:58 p.m. on March 3rd.
I just had one moment. Thank you, Mr. Kourtni. Those are all of my questions this time.
The Mormons need some. It's a lot of crazy Mormons out there.
You testified there are essentially 2 explanations for why things might be missing. One in a download. One is that it's not captured in the download, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that can happen.
It can.
And then the other is whether or not it's been deleted.
Correct.
In this case, all you can say definitively is that it's missing, correct?
Correct.
Weak.
Now, with regard to movement, that could be any device that is essentially attached to the phone through an app, correct?
It could be yes.
Okay. And so you can't say, looking at what you analyzed, exactly what device that was, correct?
So far, no.
And you can't tell where that device was in terms of location, correct?
Correct.
So it's possible that that could have been a device attached to it from some other location, but the phone's recording it, correct?
It would be unlikely.
But it's possible if it's connected to an app.
It depends on the range.
Okay.
So it would be impossible outside a certain range.
And there's a number of different ways to, or different programs, and forgive me, I am not an expert in this, so.
But he is.
There's a number of different programs or extractions that can be done on phones, correct? Or different ways to do them.
Correct.
Did you perform an independent extraction on this phone?
I did not.
Okay, or on any of the phones you've talked about today?
No.
Cinnamon. Hot.
Did you analyze any data prior to January of 2022 on either CL's phone or either phone, or I guess the first phone belonging to Ms. Richins?
I don't believe I did.
Okay, were you asked to only look at a particular date range?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, were you given the date range of interest?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you didn't cross-reference any communication or the frequency of communication between CL and Kouri prior to January of 2022, correct?
Correct.
So it could be that they communicated all the time and you wouldn't have known.
Yes.
So this could have been just a normal course of communication between the two.
So she's communicating all the time with her drug dealer? How does that help her defense? Can somebody explain that to me? Hi, Christine. Welcome.
Were you made aware of when the search warrant was, or when the first phone was seized?
Yes.
Okay. And were you given a copy of the search warrant?
No.
Were you made aware that the search warrant included evidence of homicide that they were looking at?
No.
And in that first phone, prior to Eric passing away, were you able to review any search history of the web browser
Whose device?
on the first device of Ms. Richins?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And were there any searches related to fentanyl on that?
Not that I found. There were not many searches available to
And
look at.
no searches related to prisons either?
No, not in that time frame.
No searches related to
Luxury prisons for
messages.
rich people, to be specific.
And so all the searches came from the second phone, correct?
The web searches mentioned,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that was the phone that was seized after the search warrant was issued for the first phone, correct?
That was,
Because
yes.
that's the
So
phone
that
she got
was-
as a replacement, right?
Yes, correct.
I just want to return to this mapping, or move to this mapping that you discussed. Did you look at the mapping on the second phone of Ms. Richins?
I did not.
So the state didn't ask you to compare Ms. Richins' phone to CL's location at any point, correct?
They did.
Okay,
Yes. they
but you
did.
couldn't do it, or didn't do it?
I
The
don't.
records,
So,
the mapping location for those called detail records through Verizon are no longer available
On the second phone?
on either phone.
Okay, so you were able to get them off of CL's phone, but because of Verizon, you weren't able to get them on Ms. Richins' phone.
Correct.
Oh. Thank you, Pam. Thank you.
And on that March 9th date,
Truly.
you discussed her being in
Really
Francis
appreciate it.
midday
Thank you. Thank you.
in the Maverick. What time was she at that Maverick?
Pam made a donation to help me. I've got to buy a new microphone, and I've not really worked in 3 weeks. So she made a donation to help me, and I didn't see it. It was at the very end. So I apologize about that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. More than you know. Trust me. But yeah, I've got terrible microphone problems. So thank you. Thank you.
It was about 3 p.m.,
So after
2 or 3 p.m.
After she'd been to,
She was
Francis.
she was in Francis around midday,
okay.
and she was at the Maverick at about 2:33 p.m.
Okay. Did she go back to Francis?
She went to Heber.
And she lives in Heber.
She does.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you.
I don't think I have.
Mr. Kelly, for-
Nothing.
I think he's glad to be off the
Thanks, Charlotte.
stand. He's
State Property
nervous.
Carrington.
He was so nervous.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in a matter before the court to be the
She's
truth, the whole
like-
truth, and nothing but the truth, subject to the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Morning.
Could you spell your, I'm sorry, could you state your name and spell your last name, please?
Brooke Carrington, Karrington.
How are you employed?
It is,
I am
Cinnamon.
the principal
you.
managing partner at Carrington France Financial Forensics.
Is this a company that you started?
Yes, it is.
And when did you do that?
Officially in, I think 2012, when I registered that business, but I'd been doing this for about 35 years.
What's the nature of your business?
I look at, most of the casework I get is forensic accounting, and most of the casework is cases where there are allegations of fraud or missing or misappropriated funds, tracing of bank transactions, and casework like that.
And how long have you been doing that?
35 years next month.
Thank
Do you
you.
have an undergraduate degree?
Welcome
do.
to
What is it in?
membership. I'm fixing to get really
What about a
active in
graduate degree?
membership.
I have an MBA.
We're fixing to fire up memberships.
Do you have any certifications or other degrees?
Yes, I am a certified fraud examiner. I also am certified in anti-money laundering transactions. I am also working towards certification in blockchain and cryptocurrency.
So this is probably going to be a lot, but in your 35 years of forensic counting, how many cases have you worked on?
A couple of years ago, I had to quantify that, and at that time, it was about 4,600. So
Probably more
She's
now.
an expert.
more now.
Okay. Have you provided testimony in financial crimes cases?
Yes, I have.
How often?
A handful of times a
Right,
year, I would say.
It's embarrassing.
How did you first get involved in this case?
I was originally contacted by the investigator for the estate of Eric Richins,
And who's that?
Todd Gabler.
Okay. And why did he contact you, or what was his reason for contacting you?
Mr. Gabler and I have been acquaintances and colleagues for 30 years, and he expressed to me that I have a skill set that he knows nothing about. So
And who hired you?
the estate hired me initially.
Okay. And at some point, were you retained by the Summit County Attorney's Office?
Yes,
When was
I
that?
didn't get this chick's
I believe it was May 31st of this year, just a couple weeks ago.
Who knows her name? Does anybody know her name? I need to put it in my notes. I may have to go back and look later after we finish watching if y'all don't know. Cinnamon, do you know her name? It's under that. Oh, I don't even know what my, let me see if I can find it, Cinnamon. I don't ever ask, let me look and see if I can find it. Let me start this back up. And I need to know this lady's name. I need to figure her name out.
So as part of your being hired by the estate and being retained by the Summit County Attorney's Office, have you reviewed any documents that are relevant in this case?
Yes,
What have you reviewed?
I've reviewed bank account statements, tax return documents, real property records, specifically trust deeds and warranty deeds, reconveyances. I've also reviewed insurance policy documents, tax information.
Okay. Specifically with respect to the defendant, were you able to determine whether or not she owns any businesses?
Yes,
What businesses does she own?
she owns several businesses, and the most relevant one to this case, I believe, is Kouri Richins Real LLC.
Okay. What kind of business is that?
It's in the business, in the realty business, real estate business, and I understand she flips homes, but she also acts as a realtor representing people who are purchasing homes.
Okay. And when did she start this business?
It was registered in Utah in April 2019.
All right. Were you able to find information regarding the defendant's buying and selling of homes?
Yes,
And how did you find that information out?
those documents are typically recorded, and they are public documents, and they're typically recorded at counties, recorder offices. There's also information along that line at the assessor offices, and each state has a little bit different process of doing them. Most of them do it the same way that Utah does. which is through the county recorder.
Okay. I'm going to show you, if I may approach you, what's been marked as Exhibit 2. You recognize that?
Yes.
What is that?
This is a schedule that I prepared. I use the term schedule to talk about my work product and the analysis and how I depict it. So this is a chronology of the real properties that I was able to identify attached to either Kouri personal, Ms. Richins personally, or through her company.
Okay. Does it show a timeline of acquisitions that she has made?
Yes, and I should underscore this is a timeline that they were acquired.
Okay.
So just this is the front end of her ownership.
Okay. And in 2019, and this is when her business was
Diane,
started, is that
thank
correct?
you.
That's correct.
You're a
How many homes
part.
so far have you been able to tell whether or not were acquired by the defendant?
In 2019?
Yes.
In 2019, I have 2 properties listed. One of them is the home that they were living in, and that's when the HELOC was taken out. And the other one is a different property. So I've listed 2 there.
And you've listed an amount of trust deeds for 2019. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can you explain what those are?
Trust deeds are deeds that are recorded at the county recorder's office, and they are memorializing or documenting an obligation or an encumbrance on a property. So this would represent that there's a loan for a certain amount, and that's expressed and documented in a trust deed.
Okay. And how much money, I guess, in trust deeds, or what was the amount of the trust deeds in 2019?
Those 2 trust deeds total $471,210.48.
And you've done that for each year, 2020 and 2021 as well, right?
That's correct.
And what was the amount in 2020 of trust deeds?
2020 was $2,069,280.
On how many properties?
On 5.
Okay. And 2021, what was the amount of trustees and the defendant acquired?
The amount there is $6,260,458
On how many properties?
on 13.
Do you find this significant,
Yes.
and why?
On a positive note, it depicts that the business was growing and she was actively acquiring properties. I think it's noteworthy, and it's an indication that things were growing quite significantly, and sometimes that is problematic.
And why is it problematic?
Well, it's kind of a basic thing like in business school where growth too fast, too strong, too robustly is challenging for a business.
Okay.
Yep.
Were you able to determine at the end of 2021 how much the defendant was obligated on those debts, those $6 million debts? And actually explain to me the difference. What does obligated on a debt mean?
That's a very important question and a very, very important point to understand here. I don't have access at this point to the documents that tell me the terms of these loans. So I don't know what the interest rate is of these loans. I don't know the terms that she's agreed to for these loans. I don't know what payment is required on these loans. What I do know is these are what we colloquially call hard money lenders. And I do know on some of these what these lenders do require, and it's in the neighborhood of 12 to 15%. These are not conventional loans where there's a 30-year payment amortization. These are typically short-term loans, and people in the house flipping business, the fix and flip business, typically are turning those over a little more quickly, so they don't need a 30-year loan. They need a shorter-term loan. So I understand what she's obligated on, but I do not know what the balance is at the end of a particular time period.
I see. You need more information to make that determination. Is that right?
That's correct, and that would be the loan documents themselves, the promissory notes, and the ledgers from the lenders to show what payments were or were not made and when were they made, how the interest was calculated and accrued, what other fees. Typically, these lenders have significant loan origination fees, and if payments are late, then the interest rate is higher on the late payment. There are perhaps default fees, things like that.
Okay. So do you have a rough estimate on what she was obligated to at the end of 2021?
Yes.
And what's that?
The end of 2021
Yes.
was a little over $4 million.
And you don't know if that's what she, you don't know what she did back, but you know that.
That's
was-
kind of money
at that
makes
point
you
she was
nervous.
That's what she was obligated on these properties that she still owned at that
Oh,
time.
yeah.
And this is, I
Crazy.
believe I've done a pretty good job looking for properties, but there may be others
Okay.
that I don't know about.
Okay. Were you able to look at bank accounts that belong to the defendant?
Yes,
And what is servicing a debt? What is that?
that would be a term that would explain that there is a debt outstanding, and servicing a debt would be the payments on that debt. So if I have a credit card and I have a monthly payment, or I have a balance due, my payment toward that credit card is called servicing my debt.
Okay. And were you able to determine how much debt the defendant was servicing in December of 2021, for instance?
Yes,
How much was that?
the debt payments.
Yes.
The debt payments were about $252,000 in that month.
Were you able to do?
The debt payments that she made in December of 2021, there were 94 payments, and those 94 payments totaled $252,000.
Is there anything that you found significant about those debt payments?
Yes,
What was that?
they were not to 94 individual entities. Some of them were weekly payments. For example, I know that she has an outstanding debt during that time of $5,438 that was required to be paid weekly on a debt. She has a $600 payment that is made daily for a period of time during December. And the payees on most of those debts, the large majority of those debts are hard money lenders. Some of them are credit cards.
And this was in a particular account you looked at?
That's
correct?
just in one account, yes.
And do you remember what account that was?
That's the account 6577.
Okay. Were you able to determine if she was current on her debt payments that were coming out of 6577? Did I say that number correct? Yes.
Yes, you did. I know of one account that she has that had sued her, and they filed suit in New York in December 9th of 2021.
Okay. But to ask you about that, I will ask you about that one in a minute. But
Okay.
were you able to look at the bank account and determine whether or not she was current on her payments, or whether her payments were going through correctly?
I can't tell you if she was current on her payments. I can say about those payments that several of them did not clear the bank. And
Why was that?
she was in the negative in that account from a good part of that month. She was $22,000 in the hole for a good part of that month.
So you
Not
noticed that
fun.
at least for that account in that month that there that some of the payments to the hard money lenders were not going through?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you notice any charges for overdraft fees or anything like that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what did you notice about that?
They were $25 each, and sorry, I don't recall what the cumulative number is for that, but there were dozens.
Okay. Now I want to ask you about this. You said that there was a lawsuit that you were familiar with out of New York.
Yes.
Can you explain what you found out about that?
Yes. So in that case, they did file the agreement. And so from that, it's apparent that Ms. Richins used receivables of $87,000, and receivables are her potential revenue. It's work that she's performed or earned, and she's expecting to be paid this money to her company as revenues. So that's $87,000 that's stated in the case, in the document that they filed with it. And that agreement also says that she's borrowing $60,000 against that $87,000 at 15%. And that document also spells out the terms of the agreement that she's to make weekly payments of $5,438 until that debt is paid.
And do you know why this lawsuit was brought, or what the documents indicate about why the lawsuit was brought?
According to the complaint, which is the other side's version of what happened, that she made payments of about $21,000. So that would be a little shy of 4 payments. And then after that, she defaulted.
Okay. And when was that lawsuit filed?
December 9th, 2021.
I'm nervous thinking about that.
So we talked a little bit about the bank accounts, at least do you know where the
Right,
Kouri
hybrid.
Richins Realty bank account, what the bank is?
Where they banked?
Where they bank?
Yes. That's
What
it.
is that?
America First Credit Union.
Okay. And were there any other
What?
America First Credit Union accounts that you were able to look at?
Yes.
And
Here's my question. Well, okay, to be fair, this is the same question that I have every time our Congress gets to the debt ceiling limit. Who manages their own personal lives where I guess an equivalent thought would be like if you've got a credit card that's got, let's say, a $5,000 limit on it, correct? And then you're using that credit card to pay for your rent, your groceries, and your electricity bill. And then it comes time for you to pay your rent again. And this time you don't have enough money, credit available to cover your rent. And so you petition the credit card company to raise your limit. That's what our government is doing. It is. And yet, while they are asking basically China to raise the credit limit, let us borrow more money from you, be more indebted to you, we then turn around and we send billions to the Ukraine. Now, supposedly because it's very important that you have borders and you have countries, but we don't have borders and countries. So my mind, the place that my mind goes to is, how do these Congress people that keep increasing the debt limit every time, increase, they make these unrealistic budgets, just like Kouri Richins make these unrealistic budgets where you're spending dramatically more than what you ever hope to be able to bring in. This young woman in no way had the kind of clout that would result in her being able to pay off $4 million. There was nothing about her. She didn't have any special training. She wasn't like a old family, money family, there was nothing. And yet she kept upping the ante, knowing that even in the hole she's in, she could never hope to recover, much less you can't make normal payments, but you think that you're going to be able to make payments $5,500 a week. Very few people make that kind of money beyond individual business owners. If you're on the board of a big Fortune 500 company, you might get close to that. Some of the bigger surgeons, there's a small number of people that generate that kind of income ever. And she's a nobody. For all intent and purposes, she's a nobody. Same thing with Murdoch. Now he had his business, he had his family name. They were an old money family, so he could kind of maybe back his up a little bit. But this girl, man, she was nobody. She was not, and yet they just kept giving her more money and more money. She went hard money lenders, which are basically, these people are not playing around. They're like, well, we'll give you money, but if you don't give us our money, we're going to really make things hard for you. And so our Congress people, they're making these decisions that are going to affect future generations of Americans. And you have to ask yourself, do you conduct your own finances that same way? I can't imagine anybody living like what this woman is describing about Kouri Richins, which is exactly what our Congress does every few years. It's not a left-right issue. It's always done. It doesn't matter who's in charge. It's like when you get to Washington, you have no your logic goes away. There's no rational thought. We cannot keep borrowing money and then giving money to everybody in the world. Why are we doing that? We're giving our country away. We have to quit. Money makes me crazy. This is scary though. For her, this level she was in, scary.
When were you able to look at those?
Over this past weekend.
Okay. How many accounts did you get access to?
Right, Elizabeth. Yeah, that's the gambler's fallacy, right?
Probably about 11 or 12.
Okay. Were some significant?
Yes,
Were some not?
that's correct.
Okay.
Agreed,
I'm going
Elizabeth.
to ask you
Debt-free
specifically
all the way.
about each of these in order, or not each of them, but a couple of them in order. There's the 6577, is that right?
That's correct.
What was, and that was the K. Richins Realty, right?
That's primarily, that is the name of the account. And that's, as far as I can tell, that's primarily where the transactions are housed.
And you said primarily the hard money lending payments?
Primarily there.
Okay. And that one ended up in about negative 2,200 at the end of 2021.
22,000.
22,000. I'm sorry, you're right, 22,000. Did you look at 2204?
Yes,
What primarily was that?
that's the joint account. So we call that a personal account. It's a joint account. It's held jointly with Eric and Kouri Richins.
Anything stand out in that account to you?
Yes.
What was that?
Well, it's important to me to look at kind of a runway of the account leading up to a significant time period, because it's important to understand the nature of an account. And so I've gone back to 2020, long before the review period that's relevant specifically in this case, or that is people are concerned about in this case, to understand what the nature is and what's the character of that account, how is it used, and what's typical for a particular account holder. And that's going to be different for every person and every business. And so I looked at this account, and typically it is the account that is used to pay credit cards and kids' expenses and family expenses and things like that.
Okay. Anything else stand out as you reviewed the account?
Yes, as we get closer to the time period that's relevant here, which is like the months leading up to Eric's death, I would term that, and then what happened after. There are transfers between accounts and amongst accounts. I can see, Eric's payroll coming into that account. I can see there are some deposits or transfers, I guess should say, from K. Richins Realty, payments going back to K. Richins Realty. There's a marked increase in the number of transactions that occur in that account and all of the accounts.
Mingling fun.
So you actually see an increase of money moving around in that account, say late 2021 and up until Eric's death.
That's correct. Yes.
Why is that significant? Why do you find that significant?
Well, I'm looking for what's typical or what makes sense, and so I'm looking at what's happening in the business account, and does that influence what happens in the personal account, along with what is happening in the acquisition of properties and how those move together. And so there's this kind of noteworthy crescendo that happens in the months leading up to Eric's death. There are indicators of
maybe Diane,
an increase of chaos and loss of control and larger amounts of money moving all around the accounts.
In a positive way or a negative way?
confusing way.
It feels haphazard. There's not a pattern. There's not a practice that there had been a little bit earlier in my review. And there are transactions that don't clear when there's, money is moving around just to cover transactions.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you about those transactions that don't clear in a minute. But I'm going to go to ask you about account 5244. Are you familiar with that account?
Yes.
What is that account?
That is also a personal account. That was opened in 2013. And the header on the bank statement has Kouri's name, but the signature card, and until I looked at the signature card, I thought that was just Kouri's account. But the signature card does have Eric and Kouri as a joint holders.
And what is that? What do you believe that's primarily focused when you review that?
I thought that was a business account.
Okay. Is that what you continue to think? I mean, I guess you're.
It's technically a personal account.
Okay.
According to America First, that's a personal account, but it is used as a business
And
account
why do you say that?
because of the transactions that are contained within the account.
What kind of transactions are they?
There are some payments for the loans on these properties. There are expenses that I would think would be typical of a business rather than personal. But there are some personal expenses there. I'm not saying that to be prejudicial or negative or anything. It is what it is.
Okay. Are there any credit card payments coming out of that account?
Yes.
How many credit card, or what's the amount of credit card payments coming out of that account?
I didn't quantify that.
Okay. So at the end of did you review the bank statement for that account, the 5244, for the end of 2021?
Yes.
What was the status of the account then?
That was also in the negative. It was in negative about 1,100, 1,700, something like that.
Was there a line of credit?
Just
Yes, there
like
was.
How much
Alec
was the line
Murdoch.
of credit?
3,200,
And what was the status of the line of credit?
and that was exceeded. That was tapped out.
Alec Murdoch, money problems. Barry Morphew, money problems. Chris Watts.
So you
Money
mentioned some, I guess, transactions that did not clear. Is that how you put that?
That I did. Yes.
Okay.
Very
Um,
stressful, Captain
and-
R.
Where did those, in what accounts were there transactions that did not clear? Do you remember?
I know the 6577 account, 5244 account. The 5244 is the one we've just been talking about.
Mhm.
The 2204 account is the personal account, the joint personal account, and that also had a lot of money moving in and out, and did have some transactions that did not.
Roy Vallow,
So I'm
money
gonna,
problems.
direct your attention to a transaction that occurred on October 13th of 2021. Do you remember looking at that? Where there was a check coming in from a credit union?
October 23rd of 2021.
13th,
October, for what amount?
for $4,000.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me, and that was into 6577. Is that right?
I believe so. Are we talking about 2021?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was from Penn Fed. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me about that? What you recall about that transaction?
Penn Fed Credit Union is a credit union where Kouri Richins has accounts and Eric does not, and that becomes a significant issue later. But that check was deposited into the account, and then it was returned unpaid.
And do you recall if there were any transactions made out of the account between the time the check was deposited and it came back unpaid?
I recall that there were transactions. Yes.
Okay. And there was another couple of checks deposited on November 12th of 2021 that did not clear. Do you remember those?
I remember that there were checks. Yes.
Okay. And after those checks were deposited, do you remember if there were any payments made out of the account before it came back unpaid? Sorry.
The same is true. Yes.
And do you remember who those were transferred to, or where they were transferred?
I don't recall specifically. No.
Okay. But there was money transferred out between the time the check was deposited that didn't clear and the time.
That's correct.
Okay. And then in December 23rd of 2021, do you recall any checks that were deposited for $10,000 from the Navy Federal Credit Union?
Yes.
Good memory.
And what happened to that check?
That did not clear as well.
Okay. And checks take a while not to clear, right? Is that right? So a check is deposited, it's credited to your
Exactly,
account,
Diane.
but there's some time in between the credit and the coming back not cleared. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. But it depends on the relationships between those financial institutions. Sometimes they'll clear overnight. Sometimes they'll take a few days.
Now, these seem to take about 4 or 5 days. So would that be
That's
about right?
correct. I remember that.
Cinnamon. So Cinnamon Hot says, I would like to know more about Kouri Richins' relationship with her mother-in-law. On their wedding day, Kouri and Eric's wedding day, the mother-in-law shows up, tells the maids of, not the maids of honor, not groomsmen, but the ladies. I can't think what they're called. So the maidens, they're asked to leave, and that leaves Kouri and the mother-in-law. And the mother-in-law has the prenuptial agreement in her hand. Now Kouri is all decked out in her wedding gown. about to walk down the aisle, no access to Eric, and the mother-in-law has the prenup and says, here's a pen, sign it. And bridesmaids. Thank you, Pam. My poor brain. And so she basically it was very straightforward, clean prenup, and it was what you walk into the marriage with, you walk out of the marriage with. You don't get anything from my son or from my family. If he dies and y'all are married, then you'll get certain stuff. But otherwise, if there's a divorce, you're out with nothing. You only leave with what you have. So it was a pretty hard line, tough, prenup. And she was basically forced to sign it or call off the wedding because she didn't have an attorney. She didn't have, and she signed it. She signed it. So that gives you some insight into what the relationship was like with the mother-in-law. Not good. And Eric, very much like Charles Vallow, Eric had changed his will. He had set up a trust. He had put his sister in charge of the trust. All of his, if anything happened to him, all of his assets, everything would go in the trust for the child or the children. And the executor is the sister. And so this also included not just the big financial vehicles, but it also included anything in the home. She had to leave the home when he died because everything went into this trust, this company that was for the kids only, nobody else. And that included the safe. And he was said to have had $170,000 cash in the safe. There was probably gold in the safe too, if I had to guess. But Kouri was she found out, that she was out. There would be no cash or anything. She had a guy come over, a locksmith come over and drill the safe to try to get at the money that was in there. And the sister showed up, Eric's sister showed up, and she said, you need to get your things. You need to get out of here. You are not entitled to anything that's in that safe. You are not entitled to anything that's in this house. You get nothing. And Kouri punched her in the head. So they had a literal physical assault. And it, so Cinnamon was trouble in paradise. Not a good, now mother-in-law is currently now passed away. She died a year or two ago. It is devastating. The children, I believe, are being taken care of the sister. I think that, and she has full trust of the company, her company, Eric's half of the company, as well as then all of the financial assets. Yeah, Kouri really messed up in a much bigger way than Lori Vallow did.
There were two that did not clear, and they both came from Ms. Richins' Navy Federal Credit Union account.
So these were checks written by the defendant and on the Navy Federal Credit Union account and deposited into her American First Credit.
That's correct.
It didn't. Was there money between the time that the check was deposited and the time it came back as unpaid? Were there any transactions out of that 6577 account?
Yes, there were.
And what were they?
I don't recall.
Okay, but there was a time when the money was moved out of those accounts.
That's correct.
Okay. In 6577, do you recall? I know you testified that it was overdrawn at the end of the year. Do you recall if it was overdrawn prior?
But Mama knew, didn't she?
Eric's death.
Mama's
I do.
always.
I don't remember the amount, but it was, again,
Overdrawn.
yes.
Okay. Do you? And again, I want to ask you about go back to 5244. And I think,
So I think we can move on from the accounts.
okay. Let me ask you about the life insurance policies. Are you familiar with life insurance policies?
Yes.
Oh,
on Eric's
this
life-
is crazy.
How many life insurance policies were there?
Listen to
on
this
Eric's life
crazy
at the time of
crap.
his death?
I believe there were 6.
Okay. And
6 life insurance policies. Look at the judge's face.
I mean,
He's
what
like,
were they?
what?
Can you explain what the life insurance policies were?
Yes. The first was through Minnesota Life for $347,000. And that was what is typically called the home mortgage policy, in which if the insured passes away, the home's paid off. And they write it at the amount of what the loan balance was at the time the policy's taken out. And so whatever the loan is at the time of death, I believe that loan is like 72%. They'll pay 72% of the outstanding loan. And so that one was paid.
Okay. And
And then there's a life insurance policy that Eric and his business partner had on each other, basically, and that's in coordination with a buy-sell agreement on their business. And so if one of them passes away, the other would be the beneficiary of that life insurance policy.
so let me just ask you about that instead of going through one at a time. How, besides the life insurance policy that was on Eric's business, what was the amount of money that Eric's life was insured for at the time of his death?
About $1.2 million, aside from the business buy-sell policy.
And are you familiar with any attempt to change the beneficiary of the business policy?
I'm aware that that is the report, yes.
And what was the report?
That on New Year's Day of 2022, that in New York Life's online portal, someone had logged in and had changed the beneficiaries on that policy
To
Kouri Richins.
She is
and that was
so
changed back as far
dumb.
as you know, had been changed back at the time of Eric's death.
That's my understanding, yes.
Um,
A crazy lady, Jessica.
do you know how much money the defendant got in insurance payouts?
$1.3 million, a little bit more than that, 1.3 million in June of 2022.
Can I just have a minute, Your Honor?
Of course.
Crazy, 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 crazy.
I have a couple more questions, Your Honor. Were you able to review
What is
the
she
accounts?
smiling about?
Yes,
Do you recall if there was any money in those accounts?
for most of the time, I reviewed a little bit over a year. I believe most of the time it had $5 in it.
Um,
She owes $4 million. She got $5 in account. My God. Yeah, hang your head, girl. Hang your head in shame. Shame,
Well,
shame,
yeah, this
shame.
takes what it takes.
Okay.
They're on notice that I'm otherwise engaged.
Okay. I needed that. Ms. Carrington, a couple of questions. Want to talk about, pursuant to your testimony, you've been doing this for a long time.
Yes,
And you look at investment type businesses as well as personal finances, correct?
That's
as
correct.
the course of your review of things. And you said that Kouri Richins Realty was essentially flipping homes, correct? As a business.
that's my understanding from what's publicly available.
And in your experience, that type of a business model is essentially investment properties that you don't own very long and then you resell, correct?
Yes,
So within the framework of that, it would not be uncommon or uncharacteristic to have these hard money lenders as a part of that type of business model, correct?
yes, and that I did say that earlier,
Okay.
that that's typical.
Right.
Yes.
We wouldn't go get conventional home loans for a home we're going to own for, 6 months, we hope, correct?
You could. That would be a lot lower interest rate. Even though it had a longer repayment period, someone could get a conventional loan to do that.
It would be hard to continue to get conventional loans, I would assume, when you're buying multiple properties, correct?
I don't know the answer to that. What I will say is it's very typical for someone in this industry that Ms. Richins is in to get hard money lenders.
So what you're doing was typical for the industry.
I would say yes.
And you created this schedule of homes. Did you also look at when those homes sold?
Yes, I did.
And did you correlate those payments?
Correlate.
Like, were
I'm
you
sorry.
able to see what the homes sold for?
I have been able to see many of them, what they sold for.
Okay. So, and then if you look at those, she only still owns a handful of those, correct? 4, maybe 5.
I'm sorry, what?
She only
period?
still currently owns just a small handful of those homes, correct?
I think she still owns about 6 or 8.
So she owns the ones on Canyons Resort Drive that are rental properties.
That's correct.
Okay. And she owns the Saratoga Springs house.
Yes.
Okay. And
She still owns the condo at B Street in Salt Lake City.
correct in the Heber City.
Yes, she does. It's under joint tenancy, and K Richins Realty is still on the title on that.
And were you able to see on any of these hard money loans if she partnered with anyone on them? And it's not just a hard money loan, but if there were any partnership.
The trust deeds do not indicate a partnership.
Okay. So you wouldn't know if there was some other partnership that existed on these.
Yes, that would be reflected in the trust deed, and I did not see any partnership on any of them.
It's crazy.
Were you
isn't
able
it?
to see what the
So much.
balance in the 2204 account as part of your review of
At what time period?
at any time period? Did you look at the 2204
I did.
account
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
And although there were fluctuations in her business account, that account always had sufficient funds in it, correct?
That's not correct.
There was a period of time where it did not.
There are periods of time. Yes.
And you also said that Eric was on this 5244 account that was being used for essentially business type stuff. And that was Kouri's business, not Eric's. Is that correct?
You're asking me a couple of things.
Okay, sorry, I'll
He's-
slow down.
That's
on
okay.
the
No, it's
account.
fine. It's fine. He's on the signature card. So
Okay.
when an account is opened, he signed as an authorized signer. She signed as an authorized signer. As
So
I-
he would have, as an authorized signer, he would have access if he wanted to go review what that account was doing, correct?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
That all depends on how it's set up with the online access. Just because someone's an authorized signer doesn't mean that they can come in and walk into the bank and get any information they want.
Were you,
And-
were you able to tell in this case?
Well, as I said, the bank statement does not say Eric and Kouri Richins. It says Kouri Richins. And looking at the transactions in the account before I looked at the signature card, it looked very much like a business account that Kouri would have.
And are you aware that Eric was in the stonemasonry business, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so he was, on some level, assisting her in the remodel or clean up some of these homes, correct?
That is not how I would term it.
I'm not saying financially. Are you aware that he was doing work on these homes?
I'm aware of one instance on the Franson Lane home in which he and Cody contributed about $133,000 toward the completion of the home. And my understanding is different than
Okay.
how you're portraying.
It's hard to believe she's going to try to fight this, isn't it?
Thank you.
It's really hard to believe. Yeah, I like that witness. Yay, witness. That was a good one. So,
Yeah, before
Power
we ask-
broker.
Ask that this be marked as Exhibit 3.
2 has not been hit.
And then, well, we would, I think she was just using that as a demonstration.
Okay, that's fine.
We would ask this be marked as Exhibit 3. This is a transcript of the jail call from May 8th.
Okay,
a jail call?
thank you. Brittany, we put 3 on that. Ms. Lazaro, any objection to admission of State's Exhibit 3 solely for the purpose of this detention hearing?
Not necessarily. I mean, only to the extent that I have not been provided a copy of any of the jail phone calls that I could find last night when I was searching.
Do you have any of the audio?
No, that have been provided in discovery. So,
All right.
I don't know what to do with that.
Well,
So I
out
guess,
of
yes, I
fundamental
would have.
fairness for the defendant, and without having to address the need to postpone or continue this detention hearing, I am not going to consider that phone call. State's Exhibit 1 is it. State's Exhibit 3, for the purpose of this detention hearing, is not.
Okay.
And Your Honor, we have no further witnesses. However, we do have a victim impact statement from the victim representative.
Okay, if you could just name that person for
That's
us.
Amy Richins.
Amy, if you don't mind stepping forward to the podium. Good morning. Go ahead.
Dear Judge Mrazek, I'm here today to represent my brother, Eric Eugene Richins,
Oh, that's
whose life was taken in a senseless act of poisoning on March 3rd, 2022. His wife, the defendant, has been accused of committing this crime. If she is found guilty, she has committed the ultimate act of betrayal. Eric is gone, and I am brokenhearted.
Ooh,
He
she
was my
looks
best friend and
mad.
protector. The feeling of loss is so great it is visceral. And with the sorrow comes a wave of panic and not being able to see him again. I can never talk to him, never hug him again, and never more be a part of his life. Eric's world revolved around his family, his love for hunting, the family cattle ranch, and his intense drive as a successful entrepreneur. Being born into the Richins legacy shaped Eric's formative years and resulted in a lifetime of hard work, dedication, and fierce loyalty. At an early age, Eric learned the joys of keeping horses and cows around. He spent countless hours helping our dad work the ranch, hauling hay, feeding the animals, and mending fences. He loved our family unconditionally and was a devoted son, brother, uncle, and father. Eric was a family man who always strove to be the absolute best father and husband. He was an attentive and loving father to his 3 sons and a devoted husband to his wife of almost 9 years, Kouri, the defendant. Eric did absolutely everything in his power to provide his family and his 3 sons with every possible opportunity to learn, grow, and have fun.
Wow.
He was the coach or assistant coach on all his boys' teams, which included soccer, basketball, and baseball. He spent countless hours coaching and teaching the boys to play aggressive and give it their all. Eric truly cared about every single child he coached and wanted the absolute best for all of them. There was never a dull moment when you were around Eric, whether it was him showing up to a family dinner with no socks or the sleeves torn off of his shirt because he had to make an emergency bathroom stop along the way, or his calling to tell you he rolled a 4-wheeler for the upteenth time is stuck and he needs you to come get him. It was never boring. Eric loved to have fun and always wanted to make sure everyone else did as well. He owned almost every motorized toy possible, from 4-wheelers and side-by-sides to trucks and snowmobiles, and was so excited to share those with his sons. He had the perfect combination of business sense and foresight.
What
He built
is
a very successful masonry
smiling
business from
about?
the ground up and helped many friends do the same. He had a special ability to build close relationships with everyone he worked with, which really allowed his business to thrive. Eric loved every aspect of his job, but most of all, he loved the people he worked for and those he worked with. Eric faithfully supported organizations that he truly believed in. He never was one that wanted recognition or accolades. He did most things anonymously and without recognition. Eric was a true champion of all people. It did not matter if you were an employee, friend, family, or the next random person walking down the street. If you needed anything, you could count on him. He truly cared about each person he met. Eric loved fully, laughed loudly, and lived life with reckless abandon. He enjoyed great adventures to far-off places, but also cherished the small and finer things in life. No obstacle was too great for Eric. He simply viewed each one as a challenge. No peak was too high, and the next adventure was always just around the next bend. Words cannot describe the loneliness and loss that is felt in every heart that was lucky enough to know him. Eric was such an inspiration and role model for us all. His loss has created a Grand Canyon-sized hole in this community. Except instead of taking millions of years to slowly form, our worlds change overnight. His 3 boys' entire worlds and their perspectives on life changed. None of our lives will ever be the same. Eric died under horrendous circumstances. I am tormented at the thought of what he endured. I play it out in my mind. I go through the terrible sequence of events. I wonder when he realized he was in mortal danger. I wonder what Kouri may have said to him in his last moments. How long was he conscious, knowing he would die? Where were Eric's boys when all this happened? Did they hear Eric's body fall to the ground? Did they catch a glimpse of their father taking his last breath? It's torture to think of. Why did Eric lose his life? Why did the boys lose their father? Was it because of Kouri's greed and desire to get life insurance and other assets? If so, that is abhorrent. How could anyone value life, human life, so cheaply? I cannot comprehend it. I'm overflowing with grief and pain at the thought that Eric meant so little to us.
Don't even.
If Eric had died because of an illness, he would have been cared for. He could have looked after him and been with him. If he had died because of an accident, people would have tried to help. There would have been kindness. But there's no comfort to be had here. There's no consoling thought in the way Eric died. In his last moments, after being intentionally poisoned, he was faced with betrayal and terror. The thought of it is unbearable. I am haunted by the horror of it. This last year has been a living hell for our family. We have watched as Kouri has paraded around portraying herself as a grieving widow and victim, while trying to profit from the death of my brother. Both by trying to profit from a book about his death and trying to get life insurance and assets that should go exactly where Eric wanted them to.
So the
his
kids,
boys.
the kids.
Immediately after Eric was killed, Kouri told us she could not help us get anything ready for the funeral as she was too distraught with grief. We shortly found out that was not true at all. In fact, she pulled herself together enough to go close on the purchase of a $2 million home, hire a real estate agent, hire an architect to create CAD drawings of the home, hire a lawyer in order to file a lawsuit on Eric's trust.
You hush
hire
your
a
mouth,
locksmith to come
girl.
break into and clean out my brother's safe
Is
and
wrong
attempt to
with
have Eric
you?
cremated. She mustered up the strength and resolve to do most of this within 48 hours of his death. Kouri assaulted me. I will never forget the look in her eyes when she attacked me that Sunday morning. It was early and had been snowing most of the night. I was just getting ready to leave and heading out to the car when I saw a locksmith in Eric's detached garage starting to drill out his gun safe.
Horrible.
I asked Kouri multiple
Nightmare.
times why we could not just call my dad for the code. I could not understand why she was breaking into and ruining Eric's safe. To this, she screamed at me at the top of her lungs, called me some inappropriate things I cannot share with you here, and then told me to get out of her house. It was then that I told her that she could not kick me out of my brother's house. My sister Katie was now the executor of Eric's trust and estate.
Boom.
And just like Eric, she would not want the defendant breaking into his gun safe. Kouri looked at me with pure hatred and rage. I was messing up her plan. I was getting in her way. And because of that, she attacked me. She punched me in the face and neck multiple times. It took 4 people to pull her off me that day. Before the funeral, Kouri opened a bank account and asked everyone that was grieving to send her money instead of sending the family cards and flowers. It was not even 2 weeks after Eric's passing that we were told she had taken down all but one photo of my brother and removed all his clothing from the house. Kouri put together a golf tournament in Eric's name 2 months after his death on what would have been his 40th birthday and told his family, all of us, that we were not allowed to attend. Since Eric's death, it has come to our attention that Kouri took out multiple life insurance policies on Eric without his knowledge. It
How?
appears that she forged his signature on various documents, assigned herself as Eric's durable power of attorney, inappropriately diverted money from his business to herself, and assigned herself as beneficiary of Eric's portion of our mother's retirement account. I should also not forget to mention the multiple life insurances she has taken out on the boys. Her most recent business venture was authoring a children's book about how to help grieving children cope with the loss of the death of a parent. In this book, she had the audacity to use the boys' real names and even use their last family portrait. Her behavior gives me great concern, as she has exploited the boys for money and will likely do so again. In addition, Kouri has weaponized Eric's children, manipulating my dad to do or not do things by threatening to cut him out of their lives if he did not capitulate to her demands. She similarly deprived the boys of contact with myself, my sister, and her daughters, unless we agreed to give her the money in Eric's trust. Money that Eric wanted to go to his 3 children. As if that were not enough, I've been told that Kouri started telling their 3 little boys that none of Eric's family or friends loved them. She apparently told them none of us cared for them or wanted to be around them, even though that is the exact opposite of what was happening. We all want nothing more than to be there for those 3 little boys, my nephews, yet Kouri has made sure to cut us out of every aspect of their lives. This is all just a brief summary and the start of what our family has been through over the last year. We have scarcely gone a day without finding out some new allegations or evidence regarding something Kouri appears to have maliciously done to attack and undermine my brother, his 3 little boys, and our family. We have all been there since the beginning of Kouri's and Eric's relationship. I was there on one of their first dates. We were there at the wedding. We were there when each of the boys were born. We have been there for every birthday party, school graduation, and rodeo. We welcomed her into our family and treated her as one of us. Not only did she betray our brother, it feels as though she has murdered and taken away a part of our souls as well. Because of her actions, there has not been a day that has gone by we have not lived with paralyzing anxiety and fear, worrying for the boys' lives as well as our own. I may be naive, but I never knew evil like this existed. If Kouri was in fact willing to kill Eric for money, who's to say that what she will not do? Who would be next? Kouri was in a desperate financial situation when Eric was killed, and that situation seems even worse now. We understand that she has defaulted on loans and is already a defendant in other lawsuits based on her financial misdeeds. I am truly concerned that she will stop at nothing to dig her way out of the problems, including murder. She seems devoid of moral sensibility, and there is no telling what she will do if she is released. Judge Mrazek, her fate.
did I hear that right? She took out life insurance policies on her children. Did they say that? Is that correct? Nobody knows? Yes. Holy crap. I want to know, does this woman know Lori Vallow? Is she friends with Melanie Gibb? This is exactly what was going on with Melanie Pulowski, Melanie Gibb, Lori Vallow. This is exactly the same crap. It's exactly the same. I'm nauseated, horrifying. And notice her demeanor, her body language, her affect. She psychopaths are us. I'm telling y'all.
Lies in your hands. Please do not allow Kouri to use the fraudulent life insurance proceeds to get out on bail. That would be morally reprehensible. Please do not allow Kouri to take advantage and make a mockery of our justice and legal system anymore. She has done enough. Please do not allow Kouri to hurt Eric's memory, our family, friends, and community anymore. We have been through enough. Please do not give Kouri the opportunity to hurt Eric's 3 boys anymore. They have lost enough and have been through enough.
Oh my God.
Since Eric's death, we have learned and unfortunately are continually reminded that Kouri is desperate, greedy, and extremely manipulative.
And
If she gets
cruel,
out on bail, I will
cold.
be afraid not only for my own life and those of all of my family, but most importantly for the lives of Eric's 3 sons. Our family has already suffered enough. Please do not let Kouri out on bail where she will be a risk to do further harm. Please protect what Eric put his life on the line for, his 3 boys. Thank you.
Amy, thank you.
Come on, Judge. Don't fail us now.
Ms. Casella.
Wow.
Okay. Ms. Lazaro, is the defense calling any witnesses?
I am not. I guess what I'd like to do is just largely have the court review the briefing and the attached exhibits be submitted and considered as part of this, but I don't intend to put on any further evidence.
All right. Would you like an opportunity to make any closing argument for today, Ms. Lazaro?
Yes.
Why don't we have defense go first and we'll just give the state the last word.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm telling you, we know that David Warwick lives in Utah. We know Melanie Gibb spent a great amount of time in Utah. We know that a lot of their little prepper, weekend getaways, a lot of that happened in Utah. I am thinking this is this is so remarkably parallel to the ideas that were coming out of Melanie Pulowski and Lori Vallow. We need a private detective to look into this, don't we? We need a private detective to see if it's possible that they are even because here's something to consider. So she's flipping houses, she's buying, selling property, fixing them up. What does David Warwick do? He's a general contractor in Utah. Maybe she has hired him to work on some of her projects. Agreed, Hilaria. Absolutely agreed. Oh my God, the hubris. This woman is horrible woman. Horrible.
Whether or not the court has any specific issues they would like me to address.
No, I mean, candidly, there's a threshold legal issue here, right, that comes out of the briefing. And
How about that cold creature that you're
state has been
representing?
candid about the pending Barnett case. I listened to the oral arguments
Correct.
before the Supreme Court. I think the
Wow.
state is wise to request a ruling in the alternative, but I'm persuaded by the defendant's position that as a matter of law, while a defendant charged with capital felony supported by substantial evidence does not have a right to bail, it can nonetheless request bail, and the district court retains discretion, at least under the current status of the Utah Code, to consider the request. So fast forward past that.
I will do so. And don't necessarily disagree with what may or may come out of that case that's up on paper. With regard to the sufficiency of the evidence, I mean, we're here because of a really tragic circumstance, and I don't think any of us want to forget that. I mean, especially my client. She loved her kids, she loved her husband, but she's also charged now with his murder. And so I just don't necessarily want that to get lost on the court, that we understand the gravity of the situation. With regard to the evidence, I'm going to skip through most of it. I think the most important thing, if she poisoned him, is did she ever get it from CL? Was it ever requested from CL? I don't think the state has been able to draw that nexus. I don't disagree that CL was buying drugs. I think that's clear. She has a history of being a drug distributor. She was jammed up on 4 first-degree felonies. She had a potential federal case hanging over her. And, you know, then when they look at her phone, they find evidence of additional drug distribution as an entirely new charge. Pursuant to essentially the detective's testimony, is they walked her down the line of, I need more evidence. This is what we need to know. And provided evidence to her essentially until she got it right. And then she was released. When we look at the cell phone mapping, yes, we know that she went and picked up a check. We know that she was cleaning houses. We know she cashed a check. We know she picked up drugs. But they can't put her anywhere in the same vicinity of Kouri's phone, because apparently the mapping's not available from Verizon, which somewhat surprises me, given it's Verizon.
They can say length of time between the events and the request.
Correct. But they have corroborating evidence for all the things about her buying and selling fentanyl. They have zero corroborating evidence for anything related to Kouri requesting it or giving it to Kouri. She didn't tell anybody that she was buying it for Kouri. She never had anybody with her when she dropped it off. There's nothing to make the most important correlation in this, and that's that it was ever provided to Kouri, that Kouri ever requested it. There was no fentanyl or traces of fentanyl found in the home anywhere. And I think that's significant. I think if she had gotten 30 pills on at least 2 separate occasions, that's a lot of fentanyl. I mean, if one's lethal, right, we're talking about a lot of fentanyl, and nothing is found, no traces anywhere, absolutely nothing. So I think the state's making a big leap in their evidence by saying, look, we have this girl, we know she's a drug dealer, we know she's buying fentanyl, but there's nothing to corroborate anything she says that ties it to Kouri. The glass, you know, Kouri tells them she made him a drink, right? The glass is there. No one thinks to bother to.
Where's the evidence that the glass is present?
Well, they didn't look for a glass, I guess is what I should say.
Okay.
So no glass was tested. So there's nothing to show that Kouri did anything to Eric. And by Detective O'Driscoll's testimony,
Well, her
it could have
own
been
words.
accidental. I mean, it very well could have. And I think that, given the evidence presented today, is a very plausible situation. Being bad with money does not make you a murderer. Being bad at managing your accounts,
Historically,
I
it
mean,
looks like it does.
It's bad at math, but it doesn't make you a murderer. The other thing I think that's significant is, by the testimony that came out today, the hard money loans that she owed, at least, far exceeded life insurance policy that was paid.
Yeah.
And so even getting the life insurance money was not going to solve Kouri's problems, not even close to solving her problems. And so that evidence alone, while, you know, maybe there's some other issues with Kouri's business, there's nothing to tie it to her having any motive or in any way being in a better position from Eric's
He
death. In
gives
fact, she's in a
her
worse position because of his
multi-millions
death, because
to get on an
Eric had a
airplane and
business, was
disappear into
continually
the
making money.
jungle of
You know, he
Honduras.
was,
You know what I mean?
From what it sounds like, the one putting the majority
Come on,
of the
girl,
contributions
tighten
into
up.
the joint account. So his death, from a financial perspective, has harmed her far more than any money that she gained from any life insurance. With
Horrible
that,
statement.
I'll largely submit on the remainder of our briefing, as I trust the court has been through it all.
Yeah, carefully.
Thank you.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Your Honor. With
Get
respect to the no corroborating evidence, there's a lot of corroborating evidence that corroborates CL's statements. And I think one of the things that we have that said is, you know, that she was primed and told what to say. But what really happened is, she's, you know, a year later she's asked to consider what if she remembered anything else, and she came back with, yeah, I remember more, and that's very typical of witnesses. It's typical of people that we have testified. And then just you heard all of the corroborating evidence, Your Honor, the matching with the cell phone records, matching with the mapping. Do we have her putting the drugs in Kouri's hands? We do. We have a hand-to-hand that was testified to. So we have the evidence that Kouri got, or the defendant got the drugs. We also have the evidence that corroborates all or most of CL's story. We would have more if there weren't texts that were deleted. We have a great deal of information that was deleted, and that was deleted off of the defendant's phone. So I think that is sufficient evidence just for CL, and that makes CL credible. This idea that no glass was tested, well, if you look at the pictures that we have submitted, there's nothing there. It's a staged scene. How they can argue that Eric somehow consumed this himself? There's no glass, there's no baggies, there's nothing there that indicates that this was ever taken, the fentanyl was ever taken by Eric. And also to say it's accidental, 1 or 2 pills might be accidental. 20 or 5 times the lethal dose is not accidental, Your Honor. That is someone who wants Eric dead. And the person who benefited the most from Eric being dead is the defendant, or the person who thought she was going to benefit the most from Eric being dead is the defendant. She thought she was going to be entitled to Eric's estate. She didn't know that there was this trust that had put the money into Kourtni Richins' name. So she's the one that thought on the day that Eric died that she was the one that was going to benefit. She benefited from the insurance policies. She thought she was going to benefit from more, and she thought she was going to benefit from Eric's estate. She tried to benefit from the other life insurance policy on Eric's business. That didn't happen. She also was in dire financial straits, Your Honor, writing checks on closed accounts or checks with no money in them. I know you cut me off, but that's significant.
It was in your brief.
I thank you. I understand, but that's significant because she was in dire financial straits. She was deep in debt, and the way to get out of that debt was to kill Eric Richins. She benefited financially, and she had many cases, and we talk about this all the time. Prosecutors say we don't need motive. This case has motive. This case has motive that she needed to get out of this debt, and that's the reason she killed Eric, in hopes of getting his estate, in hopes of getting his life insurance policies, and that, Your Honor, we believe is substantial evidence.
All right. The issue before the court is whether defendant Kouri Richins should continue to be held without bail during the pretrial period.
Yes, she should, Judge.
Defendant is charged, among other crimes, with aggravated murder under Utah Code 76-5202 sub 2. To convict defendant of this charge, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt at trial that defendant intentionally or knowingly caused the death of another individual under any one of the following circumstances: for pecuniary gain, or by means of the administration of a poison, or of any lethal substance. Under Article 1, Section 8 of Utah Constitution, a defendant charged with a capital offense has no right to bail if there is substantial evidence to support the capital charge. And under Utah Code 7720-201 sub 3, a charge of aggravated murder is considered a capital felony for the purposes of determining bail during the period before the state makes an election whether to file a notice of intent to seek the death penalty. Accordingly, at this time, the aggravated murder charge in this case is considered a capital felony. Moving to the substantial evidence inquiry, having considered the evidence offered by the parties, both through live testimony today and by documents attached to their briefs, which the court has reviewed at length, and having had the opportunity to weigh the credibility of that evidence, the court determines the state's evidence, notwithstanding contradiction by defendant's evidence or arguments, could support a reasonable jury reaching a guilty verdict on the charge of aggravated murder. Indeed, a jury could reasonably choose to rely on the state's evidence regarding means and motive and consciousness of guilt, which includes evidence showing that Eric Richins died of fentanyl ingestion, that he was not known to be a user of illicit drugs other than the occasional THC gummy, that defendant purchased 15 to 30 fentanyl pills from CL approximately 1 month prior to Eric Richins' death. Cell phone mapping confirms, or at least indicates to a reasonable jury, that CL's phone was near the Maverick and Draper on February 11th, and that while there, CL's phone made calls to acquaintances, capital A acquaintances as listed in the testimony and the information, and sent texts to defendant Kouri Richins, and that CL's phone then traveled to Francis and then returned, or it was in Francis and then returned to Heber. We have CL's sworn testimony that she handed the fentanyl that she acquired to Kouri Richins in a hand-to-hand transaction in her driveway. We also have motive. At the time of Eric's death, defendant knew how the premarital agreement would operate, but was not aware that Eric had changed his estate plan. So at the time of Eric's death, defendant's subjective understanding was that she would get a greater share of the marital estate if Eric died during the marriage, as opposed to what she would receive under the premarital agreement if the parties divorced. Moreover, evidence admitted in the case shows that in the months leading to Eric's death, defendant's personal and business accounts were overdrawn. She was making significant recurring debt payments, many of which were to hard money lenders, and that her lines of credit or lines of credit available to her were maxed out. And at the time of his death, Eric's life was insured for approximately $1.2 million, not including the policy related to the buy-sell agreement, with defendant listed as the beneficiary. Moreover, we have evidence from which a jury could reasonably infer consciousness of guilt. We have evidence regarding the search history that was extracted from defendant's second phone after her first phone was seized. And we have inconsistent statements made by defendant as compared to other evidence in the case regarding whether she called 911 immediately, whether she performed CPR, whether she did something else for the 15 minutes between discovering Eric dead and calling 911.
Crazy.
In considering this evidence, a jury could reasonably choose to discount and find unpersuasive defendant's efforts to poke holes in the state's case. And in so doing, a reasonable jury could reach a verdict of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt on the charge of aggravated murder based on the state's evidence. For these reasons, the court determines there is substantial evidence to support the capital felony charge of aggravated murder against the defendant in this case. Having made that determination, the court considers whether it has discretion to grant defendant bail, notwithstanding that she has no right to bail under Article 1, Section 8 of the Utah Constitution. And having considered the arguments and authorities cited in the parties' briefing, the court determines as a matter of law that in the case of a capital felony that is supported by substantial evidence, while a defendant does not have a right to bail, the defendant may nonetheless still request bail, and the district court has discretion to grant bail if the circumstances warrant doing so. But the circumstances of this case weigh soundly against granting pretrial release of any kind. First, defendant is charged with
Olive
aggravated
Garden
murder,
for
which
you.
carries the possibility of sentences as severe as the death penalty and no less severe than an indeterminate prison term of 25 years to life. The severity of those sanctions, the severity of the sanctions that follow a conviction for aggravated murder, creates a powerful incentive for a defendant to resort to desperate acts that might include harming themselves, harming members of their family,
Children.
or harming witnesses in the case. Because an incentive this powerful cannot be adequately managed in the community, it weighs heavily against granting any form of pretrial release.
Thank you, Mr. Judge.
The state has offered substantial evidence that defendant procured fentanyl on more than one occasion, and on at least one occasion deployed that fentanyl to cause the death of another person. As a general matter, an individual who is capable of this kind of decision-making is not a good candidate for supervision in the community. More specifically, given the uniquely dangerous nature of fentanyl, which has been demonstrated tragically by events in Summit County, defendant's alleged conduct, as supported by substantial evidence, is especially dangerous. Indeed, these circumstances constitute clear and convincing evidence that defendant would pose a substantial danger to the community if released on bail, a substantial danger that cannot be adequately managed by any combination of conditions of pretrial release that are available in Summit County. For these reasons, the court finds the circumstances of this case, as supported by substantial evidence, weigh soundly against any form of pretrial release. The state's motion for pretrial detention is granted. defendant Kouri Richins shall continue to be detained without bail during the time she awaits trial or other resolution of the criminal charges against her. Ms. Richins, you have the right to an expedited appeal of the court's ruling today. You must file a notice of appeal within 30 days of the court's ruling, and you have the right to be represented by counsel on that appeal. Let's pause there for a moment. Ms. Cassell, any questions?
There it
No,
is.
Thank you.
Ms. Lazaro,
There it is.
where do we go from here? Are you prepared to set a preliminary hearing?
I don't think so, because I think just based on the state's briefing and evidence provided, there's a lot of stuff that I don't have yet and probably need experts to look at, especially with regard to the phones.
That's right.
What is a
Kouri
reasonable
should have
time
worked it out with
to
old
set a
Hubbard.
scheduling conference, understanding that I'm going to push counsel to move this case as fast as possible, given that Ms. Richins is in custody?
I understand that and appreciate it. I guess that question should be posed to the state as to when they think they can get me things. Like, I can't prepare without the evidence. I'm at their mercy at this point.
Can we check in on the 26th?
Take a look at this woman, her face, right? Her body language. In the beginning of this hearing, she didn't look any different than she looks now, right? In the beginning of this, maybe she had some hope. Maybe she had some hope that maybe she could, be out on bail, but confined to her home, right? Now she's just been told, you're literally probably never getting out of jail again, ever. Like never, right? Where is the change in affect? Where's the fear, the sadness, the anger, the frustration? Where is it? She's even her legs, she's still in exactly the same body position that she's been the whole time. It's not normal, right? If she knows that she's guilty, if she knows that she did this, she knows. I mean, she's the one that looked up luxury prisons for rich people. Shouldn't you at least see some kind of fear or resignation or dread? She looks no different than in the beginning. Let me find the example. Hold on. That's the beginning. That's the beginning of the proceedings. When there was some level of hope, maybe a teeny tiny, just a finite, teeny littlest morsel of hope, but at least some level of hope, right? Here is, hold on. This is her after the sister-in-law has spoken, basically eviscerated her. That is after the judge says, go straight to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Why is this important? This is what you see when someone has a primary, or when someone has something that is wrong in that corrective feedback, where they're not experiencing emotions like guilt or sorrow, empathy, they're not being affected by the environment. She feels exactly the same way all the time, which is, if you listen to these psychopaths when they're interviewed, they feel a bit numb and quite detached. They don't have much reactivity, which is one reason why a lot of psychopaths will do things like skydiving or bungee jumping. They can be very dangerous people, have a history of broken bones and things like that. because they're just trying to feel something. Many of them are, cutters, they self-harm. But no change. None of this. Now, she may be intellectually, she may be saying, oh, wow, this sucks. This sucks. This didn't turn out the way I wanted. It's just been revealed to everyone that she took life insurance policies out on her children. What about a change in that? For that, what about the shame or the horror, the indignation that somebody would think that she would try to kill her kids? But you get nothing, no change. Not psychotic? I don't think so. I would love for you, Linda, at its crime and plunder to roast this poor excuse. So I have zero doubt Plunder and Linda they will get on this case in good enough time. This woman is a trip, and it's a pretty good example that this whole psychopathic deviant thing is not owned strictly by men. We got Lori Vallow, we got this chick. I will say, of course, we don't know much about her, and we haven't had many photographs or videos or anything like before all this happened. But, Lori, it was weird with Lori Vallow because Lori, a lot of people that knew her, they said that she changed, that there was a notable change in her demeanor and her personality when Chad came on the scene. But in reality, it's exactly like the Chris Watts thing, that she is simply a mirror. The psychopath is going to reflect whomever they're looking at as their anchor. And that with Chris, it was Shanann was the anchor until she went to her parents' house, and then that anchor transferred to Nicole Kessinger, and he began acting out what would be appropriate to Nicole Kessinger. Saw the same thing happen with Lori Vallow, that initially her anchor was Charles Vallow, that her anchor was Charles Vallow. And so she really reflected that real pro-social, family-oriented, perfect mom role. But then Daybell comes on the scene, and now she seems to completely change, abandon her children completely. But she's always been the same. She's simply reflecting whoever's in the room with her, whoever she's attached to at the moment. It looks like Kourtni's doing the same thing. Again, I haven't done testing with any of these people. I haven't done any clinical interviews. I don't know anything about them that no one else would have access to. I'm simply discussing what might be happening. All right. You guys are awesome. I appreciate that you watched with me today. I hope you enjoyed. I enjoyed it. I like having someone to talk to, when we're watching these trials and such. I do feel a little weird about this. I do need to order a new microphone, and I'm probably going to end up having to get a new computer too, I think, because I have a very old computer that I'm using right now. Not that this system is for work, and so I don't typically use it, but I'm going to be needing to buy a microphone upstairs, possibly a new computer. I'm going to start with a new microphone. It feels weird, but I've been asked to either put up my PayPal or do an Amazon wish list. So I'm going to put up my PayPal, and then I'll get my Amazon wish list. There's only going to be 2 things on it. So I'll put it up here if you want to help. Because I have been sick, I haven't been working, and I've invested a lot of money into the whole channel thing, and I don't really get super chats or anything, but I have this week. It's been great. I'm very thankful. Trust me. Pam Frenchman, Diane has been awesome. Lots of people have been very, very, very helpful. So here is my PayPal if you want to help. Again, it's for a microphone. going to be the same exact microphone I have now that broke, because it had a great sound. It was really good. And I don't know why it went out. I don't know what happened to it. My fear is that it's my computer, but I'm going to try a new microphone first because it's much cheaper. So we'll see. All right. But thank y'all. I appreciate it. And I'll be back. I sure do appreciate all of your help. Y'all have a good evening.